about this because we have very amazing speakers today. I will invite Bapak, Dr. Atsushi Yasutomi from Eikei University of Hiroshima. Dr. Atsushi Yasutomi is a full-time associate professor for Department of Social System Design. And he is the expert of Indonesia and Japan relation. And we are so excited to welcome you, sir. Konnichiwa.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for inviting me to this great opportunity. And let me share the PowerPoint. I hope this works. Is it working?
Yes, it's working. はい、見えました。
And just give me one second, just adjust something. Yeah, if I don't do this, then this is going to be. So I hope this is good enough. The presentation materials, you can see it, right? Okay, let me do this. So one more time, I would like to say thank you very much for this great opportunity to talk. And the keynote speaker talked about mainly about economic cooperation between Indonesia and Japan. I would like to focus rather on security issues and defense issues because this is one of my my areas of studies. And since you are also interested in the Japanese peace process and so on, so I'd like to focus on these two things. And at the introduction, this photos, you can see two photos ready. You will see the very famous this dorm in Hiroshima, which is very close to my my apartment. And also, this Prime Minister Kishida riding on boarding as a tank also. So you will see these two different approaches to peace, and I'm going to into detail what it means, these two processes to peace. But before that, I just would like to make a self-introduction. I was actually born in Fukushima, which is only 60 kilometers from Fukushima nuclear plants. We have 4 nuclear plants, which are not used anymore. And I went to many places overseas, but I just would like to highlight that I went to, I was having this research position in Jakarta a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, I think. And that's where I met my great friends, Benny Mufti, Wira, everybody is here on this wave. And I made back to Jakarta 2023, just a month ago. I had really a good time over there. And I am teaching at Eikei University of Hiroshima, as this introduction was already said. I'm teaching security studies in peace studies. A very small building like this one. It's just one building university. It's municipal, public university, bilingual university. I teach also subjects in English language as well. So when you hear Hiroshima, I think everybody remembers atomic bomb, of course. But I also like to say that Hiroshima also hosts important naval base as well, especially this place called Kure. Japan Maritime Self-Defense Forces has huge naval base, and it's very interesting to visit there. And also we have a naval arsenal / commercial shipyard at Japan Maritime United and Kure. And also you can see this retired submarine. It's a real submarine, but it's retired, and you can visit inside this submarine, which is exciting also. So I just wanted to advertise Hiroshima is not only about nuclear weapon, I mean atomic bomb, of course, but other sides as well. So today, very briefly, because today, this morning, I was told that I have only 15 minutes to talk, and I already spent 3 minutes already. So I just would like to highlight very few selected issues One is Japan's nuclear policy, and then very quickly security outlook since the 2010 and the Japanese response to the security policy. Okay, but when you talk about this Japan nuclear policy, and everybody I think in Indonesia has already seen this Oppenheimer film. But unfortunately, it's not come to Japan yet. I haven't seen this movie yet. So please don't tell me the ending story. I don't want to ruin myself by this story. So I'm looking forward to that. It is not really coming to Japan yet. We don't know when. But anyway, so I think this film already inspired many people about the Japanese policy towards nuclear policy. Now, very basic lines. Of course, we stick to this peaceful use of nuclear energy. And also, we have Japan is a signatory of NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I think everybody knows that, NPT. And also, we have these 3 non-nuclear principles of nuclear weapons. That means no possess of nuclear weapons whatsoever, no producing nuclear weapons, of course, and no allow entry into Japanese soil. Those are 3 non-nuclear principles of nuclear weapons. We have that for a long time, of course, and then at the same time, we also enjoy this nuclear umbrella under the US-Japan alliance, which is also extended deterrence. Now, this policy has been challenged somewhat by probably it has begun with the 2011 Fukushima disaster. What does it have to do with the nuclear weapons? Of course, it has nothing to do directly with nuclear weapons per se. But if you look at the Japanese public fear towards the nuclear hazards is very big, be it civilian or military. If you hear nuclear, and then everybody talks about nuclear weapons, at the same time, nuclear power plants. So if you look at this demonstration, this poster, it says no nuclear power plants and no nuclear wars. So I just wanted to demonstrate that people associate nuclear weapons and nuclear power plants together. You cannot say one to no to the other. So it has to go together. Also, they talk about measures against terrorist attacks on nuclear facilities. So people started to talk about this myth of safety, which is collapsing maybe, and we have only 10 nuclear plants reopening out of, we have had 54. And nation-dividing debates over reopening of the dormant nuclear power plants is still going on. If you look at the public opinion, half of this population say, yes, we should reopen. Other half people say, well, we shouldn't open. So we are somewhat changing because, we are talking about energy security, particularly after Ukraine energy price skyrocketed these days. Energy security record-breaking heat is also going really bad these days. The temperature goes up to like 40 degrees, and then you really have to use this air conditioning still. And also, security challenges in East Asia is dynamic, of course. North Korea has tested like 6 nuclear tests so far. Missile test into Japan, Sea of Japan is very frequent. And more importantly, I think according to US DOD, China is predicted to have like 1,500 nuclear warheads by 2035. So that is also scary. And also Russia, Ukraine, of course, everybody has heard of Putin's threat of the nuclear weapons, and tactical nuclear weapons have been transferred to Belarus. So these nuclear threats have been a big agenda for nuclear policy. Now, Japan's nuclear policy in the 21st century looks like this one. Of course, we stick to this NPT regime, of course, as I mentioned. So we have to rely on a nuclear deterrence, extended nuclear deterrence with the United States, of course. And we have not been a signatory of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Japanese delegation has explained that we cannot sign this treaty, and it has been backlash from many anti-nuclear activists, victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki alike, because we are the only country which have been victimized by the atomic bomb. And then why is Japan not the signatory of a Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons Treaty? And recently, well, not really recently, late Prime Minister Abe talked about nuclear sharing. Is that an option? So we have this discussion. Nuclear sharing is like U.S. tactical nuclear weapons on the Japanese soil, which is controlled and operated by the United States. It's been a European model. It's a German, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Turkey also uses this model. But in actuality, the Japanese public doesn't really like this idea, and it seems to be too unrealistic option. But it's been discussed so much among the security policies specialists. Prime Minister Kishida, when he became a prime minister, who wrote a book, A World Without Nuclear Weapons. I think it is modeled by Obama. I always tell my students not to copy anybody's title of the book, but probably he borrows this idea. I don't know. Anyway, he has responded to Putin's nuclear threats, North Korea's nuclear developments, of course. So he's from Hiroshima constituency. So I think he has a very good idea of this dream of making a world without nuclear weapons. So that came to a very concrete idea when we had this G7 summit, if you remember, just May 19th to 21st, which is not so long time ago. Apart from this conclusion of the G7 summit, he himself, the Prime Minister, made this Hiroshima vision, and he has 5 points to summarize. Ultimate goal, he seeks ultimate goal of a world without nuclear weapons, with an undiminished security for all. And number 2, which is also important, realistic, pragmatic, and responsible approach to nuclear disarmament. And 3, 4, 5 targets Russia, China, and North Korea. Raise concern about nuclear developments and so on. So I think these 5 points have been really focused and paid attention in the Japanese public. Now, this Hiroshima vision, on one hand, it was highly evaluated, especially among these realist security scholars and strategic thinkers, saying that we have this very successful consensus on a world without nuclear weapons as the ultimate goal, especially after Putin's threat. Especially here in Hiroshima, we announced this Hiroshima vision, which is very important. That also became very strong signal to Russia, China, and North Korea. And also we kept this nuclear deterrence, realistic, pragmatic, and responsible approach to disarmament. On the other hand, it was pretty heavily criticized by mainly anti-nuclear peace activists, scholars, and opinion leaders, saying that this Hiroshima vision does not even mention anything about this treaty of the prohibition of nuclear weapons, which they think Japan should sign. Didn't mention anything about it. And also this Hiroshima vision acknowledges the realistic necessity of nuclear deterrence. And they believe that nuclear deterrence and nuclear disarmament do not go together. So, and maybe I should mention very lightly Governor Yuzaki, which is the prefecture governor of Peace Hiroshima. When he came to say the peace declaration, 6th of August, which is 10 days ago, and he said this: there are still people in the world who strongly support the theory of nuclear deterrence and believe that nuclear weapons are still essential for peace. Despite the goal of a world without nuclear weapons upheld by the leaders, these adherents of the theory of nuclear deterrence work to delay the process of nuclear disarmament. What the believers in the theory of nuclear deterrence must do now is to face up to this reality, admit that they cannot bear such responsibility. So his message was very strong against this Hiroshima vision. I shouldn't say so much about Governor Izaki because he himself created this university. So maybe I should shut up now. Now, counter arguments to governor's statement. Security experts, defense policymakers say, well, I think it is wrong to assume that nuclear deterrence and disarmament are at odds with each other. Disarmament needs to be accompanied by balanced dialogues between countries while assuring their safety based on deterrence. And also they claim that unilateral disarmament might well foment countries, encourage many countries with more ambitions to change status quo by force. So I think I talked too much. I just would like to go very fast. Security outlook. Main thing has been already written in white paper of the defense, which is also going to be available in English very soon. They talked about China, English as well also. China, North Korea, Russia has become very dangerous. I mean, their security has been very tense. So we made significant legal reforms allowing Japan's self-defense forces to engage more in protecting the Japanese territory and citizens' home and abroad, and also relaxing regulations on the use of weapons in missions abroad. Also, last year we had this national defense strategy, and we made promise to the Japanese people, we will double the defense spending for the next 5 years. We already had this record high defense budget, 46 billion US dollars, which is already high, but we are going to achieve 2% of the GDP, which is a NATO standard. Also, defense cooperation, weapons, we are making changes so that we can sell and transfer weapons to foreign countries. But this principal guideline says we should restrict these weapons to 5 types: rescue, transfer, alert, surveillance, mine sweeping. But even this one, we are talking about this further changes. Maybe we can transfer even lethal weapons like guns and missiles and so on can be transferred to other countries like Ukraine, because we already sent like generators for winter, bulletproof vest, helmet, surveillance drones, which is not really, paid attention to all these countries. So we should maybe make changes into policies. Official security assistance, I think my colleague Kiba is going to talk about this a lot in detail, as well as capacity building to aging militaries. I just would like to finish. I'm sorry, I am already, my time is over, nearly conclusion. I'd like to finish with my conclusion within 1 minute. Japan has been responded to drastic changes of the international security environment in Asia beyond by clearly departing from the conventional post-Cold War defense structures and defense policy. And that reminds me of Professor Aya Ben Ali, who said, normalization of the Japanese military, defense structures, organizational culture, public attitudes, and so on, was once unique under the name of post-war pacifism, but he says we need to change and we need to depart from old norm to the normal military, just like the other militaries. So normalization process is underway now. It is inevitable facing the reality of the security environment today. Also, we have still agendas like constitutional amendment and so on, public understanding of the nuclear deterrence, roles of the military, concept of soldiers, deterrence, defense, combat, and so on. We should change this mentality. Okay, thank you. I think I talked too much. I will finish here, and I will welcome any questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yasutomi, for amazing presentation. I will not reveal anything about Oppenheimer, so don't worry about that. When we're talking about peace, we always talk about defense as well. And we're going to have the discussion after the session later on. So don't worry, everyone. You can also write the question on the chat box first, and we can discuss later on. Next, we're going to invite our honorable speaker, Dr. Saya Kiba. She is the Associate Professor at Kobe City University of Foreign Studies, and also a member of the expert panel for the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan Friendship and Cooperation by Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dr. Saya Kiba, you can start your presentation now.
Yes, thank you. I would like to share my screen here. Oh. Did you see that? The PowerPoint?
Yes, very
Okay.
clear.
Okay, thank you so much. And good afternoon. My name is Saya Kiba. My real name is Saya, and then my Indonesian Malaysian friend always joke with me, nama saya Saya. But it sounds very strange, but it's a Japanese name. So my background is Southeast Asian studies, and particularly I focus on the Philippines and Thailand. I worked in the Japan embassy in the Philippines and in Thailand, but also I'm very much interested in Jakarta. And last month, together with Dr. Yasutomi, I was in Jakarta, and then I had a very good time for the interview and meeting friends. So today I want to talk a bit about the Indonesia-Japan relations after the World War II, and then the background of the securitization of Japanese foreign policies. Okay, so how can I? Yeah. So this year is the 50th anniversary of Japan-ASEAN friendship. But so what happened 50 years ago? So here's a brief history of the post-World War II Indonesia-Japan relations, or the ASEAN-Japan relations. Yeah, of course, after the war, our relationship was mainly occupied by the war repatriation. The war repatriation, which was a monetary compensation and also associated with the infrastructure project. And then it was later called the ODA, the Official Development Assistance, with the yen loan projects with Japanese companies, the tied loans. Okay, so in 1960s, ASEAN-Japan or Indonesia-Japan relation was not really good. Japanese manufacturing companies started to set up the factories in response to the import substitution industrialization policy. And then in Southeast Asia, they were not very, they're loved. They are called economic animal or economic reinvasion. So the Japanese company, together with the ODA project, they come back to Southeast Asia for another invasion. And then also there are some problems like environmental destructions or forced eviction of the people because of the big construction of the dams and roads and highways. And then there was a first ASEAN-Japan dialogue on the synthetic rubber. So it was 1973. So it has been 50 years since 1973. Okay, so but I do not know why we commemorate this 1973, because our relationship was really not really good at the time. And on the following year, there was a big anti-Japanese riot or the mob in Jakarta and Bangkok when our Prime Minister Tanaka visited Southeast Asia. And so it was a pity history for entire 1960s and 1970s. And then In 1977, when our Prime Minister Fukuda visited Manila, he gave a speech, and then later that is called Fukuda Doctrine. So he clearly said that the Japan will never be a military power, so don't worry, don't worry. And Japan will consolidate the mutual trust based on heart-to-heart understanding with Southeast Asian countries, and Japan will be an equal partner of yours. So, and then later soon, our relationship was normalized. Okay, and then after 1980s, the Japan tried to introduce the goodness of Japan, like Japan products, Japan systems like Kaizen, or the maternal and child health care book, or Japan culture like manga, anime. Now it's very popular, and also the Japan funded good quality infrastructure project. So they try to promote Japan, something good on Japan. And in 1990s, it's a different. Okay, so the Japan tried to understand ASEAN, or the Japanese people tried to introduce ASEAN to Japan, and Japan became aware of the necessity to know more about ASEAN people, and then mutual understanding. So this is the website of the 50th anniversary of ASEAN Japan. Now you will know that it's not really the promotion of Japan, it's more promotion of ASEAN countries to Japan. So we have to know more about Southeast Asian partners. And then this is the website. We have Bahasa as well. So this is the Bahasa website of this 50th year anniversary. Okay, so it changed a lot. And then this is some data before the COVID. Okay, so Japan to ASEAN and ASEAN to Japan, people-to-people exchange. The residents is like this, and then the students, we have a lot of ASEAN students in Japan. And Japanese people also study in ASEAN countries. But in terms of the tourists, okay, Japanese people visit Southeast Asian countries very often, but the ASEAN people are not so much, okay? So considering the population size of ASEAN and Japan, we still have this kind of imbalance between ASEAN and Japan. So more Japanese going to ASEAN, but not less ASEANese coming to Japan in terms of tourism. Okay. So this is the basic status quo of the Japan-ASEAN relationship. So what is new? As Dr. Atsushi Yasutomi already mentioned, after 2010 or 2012, since the Prime Minister Abe became the Prime Minister for the second time, the Japanese policy is more for the security, okay? So, and there are many security dialogue between Japan and Indonesia, Japan and ASEAN countries, and then we also set up the capacity building programs by the Japan Self-Defense Forces, or JSDF. So what is JSDF? Okay, our constitution doesn't allow Japan to have the armed forces. So we don't have the armed forces, but we have the Japan Self-Defense Forces. So Japan Self-Defense Forces, JSDF, is a kind of military seeking for the public support. It was created in 1954 to respond to the Korean War, and then it has. But we cannot fight. So the Japan has been heavily relied on the U.S. defense system, and the Japanese people still have strong fear of being involved in American war. Okay, and then some people, according to the survey, like less than 10%, but some people still believe that the very existence of the JSDF is unconstitutional. Okay, so the Japan Self-Defense Forces are keeping very low profile in Japan to be loved by people. Don't be criticized. To avoid criticism, Japan Self-Defense Forces try to focus on more on disaster relief activities, humanitarian assistance in Japan. So that's the basic, that's the basic figure of Japan Self-Defense Forces. Okay, so but now the Japan Self-Defense Forces can go abroad, and they can also go to Indonesia. So why the pacifist Japan? Why the pacifist Japan has this kind of military, and then why JSDF can go abroad? The turning point was 1991. 1991 was the end of Gulf War. Okay. So after the Gulf War, this is the thank you advertisement of the Kuwait by the Kuwait government posted in Washington Post. During the Gulf War, Japan sent the aid money to Kuwait for the reconstruction, but of course the JSDF, the self-defense forces, couldn't join the war. So the name of Japan was not appeared in this thank you ad. And then so we call it trauma of Japanese diplomacy. We paid a lot, but nobody appreciate us. So we have to do something. Okay? So it was an international pressure, particularly the pressure from the US. You have to do something. You have to contribute for the international society using the self-defense forces. Then gradually, because of that kind of international pressure, the Japan self-defense forces are getting, go abroad. So in 1990s, because of the criticism, checkbook diplomacy, okay, you are just paying money, but you do not sacrifice your soldiers. Then we created the new law, Peacekeeping Act, and then deploy the first PKO, peacekeeping operation mission to Cambodia. So we are much behind. I know that Indonesia is contributing a lot to the UN PKO missions, but we just started in 1992. And after 2001, after the 9/11 terror attack in the United States, the Japan even sent the self-defense forces to the non-UN missions, like in Indian Ocean, to support the Afghanistan mission in the United States, or reconstruction in Iraq, or anti-piracy in Gulf of Aden in Djibouti. So we are not involved in combat. Okay, no combat missions. It's more for the infrastructure, engineering. But gradually, the Japan tried to send the troop to the different countries. And after Abe administration, after 2010s, the Japan tried to emphasize the visibility of Japan self-defense contribution. So the JSDF is doing something good in many countries. For example, this is a WNPKO in South Sudan, and there's another Sakura project. It is a cooperation with the JICA in South Sudan. Okay, so our soldier is teaching sewing to the South Sudanese. It is not actually their primary mission. And then this is the capacity building assistance. So we send the self-defense forces abroad and tell them, like in Cambodia, in Mongolia, in Vietnam, they are teaching, some technique. And also, this is the real mission. This is not an exercise. In 2013, this is the highest number ever after the World War II. The Japan self-defense forces went abroad for disaster relief. Okay, so it was an actual mission. So the combining this kind of HADR, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, capacity building, gradually they are going abroad. Okay. And then in 2014, Prime Minister Abe, in a Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, he clearly mentioned that he will focus more on ASEAN, security assistance for ASEAN. Then this is the diagram he used. He said that the Japan will come up with a new assistance menu to Southeast Asian partners, combine various options like ODA, defense equipment and technology cooperation. This is a very diplomatic word, but it's an arms export. And then capacity building by self-defense forces. Okay, so the combination of different things, even though we cannot fight, we cannot be involved in any combat activities, but we can do a lot of things, even without amending the constitution. For example, this is a capacity building in the Philippines. This Japanese soldier, is telling them how to drop the relief goods from the belly of the aircraft. This is in Indonesia. Okay, so in Indonesia, actually, that's funny. The Japanese self-defense forces are hiring the Japanese Nihongo teacher, the Japanese language teacher, and then train the TNI officers. Japanese language training. Okay, so it is also a part of our Ministry of Defense project. Sounds very funny. And then you may know the Japan also provided the coastal guard ships to Indonesia and to the Philippines, Vietnam. Okay, so this is done by ODA because Coastal Guard is a civilian agency. It's not a military, right? So this is ODA. And this is defense equipment. So the Philippine Navy already received the TC-90 patrol planes from Japan. And then gradually we try to, sell our defense products to Southeast Asian partners. Okay, so this is the first case, the transfer of the air surveillance system, the radar system to the Philippines, and the Philippines already bought our product. Okay, so this is the first and the only case that the Japan's product was actually received by the partners, not yet with Indonesia, because we are very new. Okay, so with Indonesia, it's more on the exercises like this. Okay, then like this one. Okay, so capacity building or the joint exercises to learn each other. So I want to say that Japan tried to make the JSDF more visible in Southeast Asia. So at least we have to show that our soldiers can do something good abroad. They can be abroad and then they can do something better. Not the combat, not the good, something good. And the changes are really done by salami slicing mode to avoid the major criticism inside Japan. As Dr. Yasutomi mentioned, we have a pacifist population. So if we do it openly, then there are many, criticism or the opposition from Japan. So we never amend the constitution. I think it's impossible to amend the constitution, but we can do a lot of things even without changing the laws or the institutions. Okay, so what's new? Last December, the Kishida administration approved the 3 new strategic security documents, including the national security strategy. And then he clearly said that that Japan will increase the defense capacity and defense budget from 1% of the GDP to 2% of the GDP. And the national security strategy also shows the intention to cooperate with the like-minded countries. There's no definition what is like-minded countries and ASEAN countries. So it's a burden sharing with the United States, our only ally. And the Kishida also mentioned, he will relax the export condition of the used defense hardware. So more arms export. Okay, and then to prepare for that, in administrative level, Japan concluded agreement on transfer of defense equipment and technology with ASEAN countries. So with Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand, we have already have this kind of agreement. And then now they are, discussing what kind of arms, what kind of equipment is needed, what kind of, equipment we can sell to the Southeast Asian countries. And then they even discussed like status of force agreement or the reciprocal access agreement with the Philippines. Not yet. But we are very new in this field, because we only have one case of the arms export, which is to the Philippines. And then we are very, very new in this field of defense equipment transfer. So we just, even before the starting line. And that is why there are so many defense dialogue these days with Indonesia, Japan, like 2+2 meetings with foreign and defense ministers, and then the bilateral meetings like this. And then in every bilateral meetings, they are talking about, the joint exercises and the new schemes, such as the arms export. Okay? And then within this year, Japan will probably, change the condition to sell the defense equipment. So now this is the Philippines, the helicopters or the tanks can be exported from Japan. So it's new. Okay? And then the latest one is OSA. We are very familiar with the ODA, the Official Development Assistance, but now the ODA will be combined with OSA. OSA is Official Security Assistance, and the priority country will be the Philippines, Malaysia, and Bangladesh, and Fiji. So it was just announced this year in April, and Japan will set a new scheme. It's a new scheme for the security. We do not know yet. It's probably the infrastructure project related to the military assets. So, and then it will be under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not the Ministry of Defense. So it's a similar to ODA, but more on the security focus, more defense focus. So that's the latest. Okay, so this is my conclusion. As Fukuda Doctrine clearly mentioned, we have tried the equal partnership with Southeast Asian countries, and I believe that it was very, very equal. And now Japan finally tried to move on the defense equipment transfer, or OSA, the new schemes, the securitized scheme to ASEAN countries. However, it's tough. ASEAN partners are very tough, particularly Indonesia is very tough partner. And ASEAN countries are not simply the customer or recipient of Japan's product and service. It was a customer and it was a recipient of Japan's service in 1980s. Probably until 1980s, 1990s, it was, the ASEAN was a recipient. But now nobody are interested in buying Japan's products or the defense equipments. Okay, so we're very, very, very new in this market. And then the Indonesians and ASEAN partners are much more experienced in security cooperation. We are still new. So we are actually learning from the Southeast Asian partners. And Indonesians or ASEANs may shape or criticize Japan's foreign and security policies. So that they can actually modify our policies through the negotiation and through the very tough negotiation. And they may provide, you may provide a platform and opportunity to internationalize or to make us aware, particularly the Ministry of Defense and the Japan Self-Defense Forces. They provide the opportunity for the JSDF to go abroad, to experience the international environment through the various meetings, negotiation, and joint exercises. So that is the status quo of Japan, Southeast Asia, or Japan-Indonesia security cooperation. Because actually we are much behind the scene, and then I would like to focus on I would like to emphasize that Indonesia is really a crucial partner which can actually modify our security policies and foreign policies. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kiba. We learned so much from your presentation. It's very amazing to see the shipment of power, soft power also from the different sides. And we can see that probably after this webinar, we can talk more about what kind of cooperation between Indonesia and Japan, what kind of partnership that we can talk more in terms of security cooperation and joint forces later on. And we will have that discussion, that kind of discussion later on from during this webinar as well. So we are very excited. Now, without waiting much more, I will invite Mr. Ishaq Rahman as our third speaker. He is the lecturer at Hasanuddin University for Hubungan International Relation, and also the General Secretary for Asosiasi Ilmu Hukum Internasional Indonesia. Pak Ishaq Rahman, apa kabar Pak?
Baik, terima kasih. Selamat sore.
Selamat sore, silakan Pak.
Baik, oke. Terima kasih, thank you very much. Yang saya hormati Mr. Atsushi Yasutomi, Kiba-san, selamat sore, Pak Asep, serta all of the participants that still join our discussion this afternoon. First of all, I would like to confess. Actually, I'm not well prepared for this seminar, but I have a presentation and I have a previous research about the Japanese role in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia. So I will share this part of research. And frankly speaking, this is quite old data, but I just take a look that the situation is not much different. So maybe some of them is still relevant, but some of the situation and the context is already changed. So let me start by can you see my share screen?
Yes, okay. Yes, very clear.
Right. So we have we have a presentation from Yasutomi-san about the security issues and from Kiba-san about the official security assistance. I would like to go to a different path of Japan, Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia relations in terms of democracy assistance. Why democracy assistance? We all know that after World War II, democracy has been utilized as an important tool in foreign policy of many major powers, particularly Western alliance. We all know that in the beginning, the democracy assistance is a part of military operations provided by United States military in many developing countries at the time. Western countries, especially United States, utilize the term of democracy, of freedom, and so forth in order to promote change in autocratic and authoritarian countries at the time. And also, following the Carnation Revolution in 1974, the widespread of democracy more intensive. We now more than 60 countries has been in transition to democracy in the world in the very various way of transition. And we all then find that some of these countries succeed in transition, and some of them are not in still in struggling for this transition process. And promoting democracy also has a critical point related to the issues of external interference to the domestic policies. This has always become an issue because sometimes if we take a look from the perspective of national sovereignty, sometimes people think that promoting democracy provided by foreign assistance is quite critical to the term of sovereignty. And the second one is why Japan. We all know that Japan has experiencing unique path to democratization. In the transition after war, we all know that after World War II, Japan has become a democratic countries, and I read several literatures that stated that Japan is one of the most democratic countries in not only in Asia but also in the world. And after 70 years of the war, Japan has come to the world as an actor that with a pacifism principle, and they can become a sample. I read an article that mentioned that Japan is now become like a trailblazer. They are become like a sample of how peace democracy can be achieved. And also, Japan is one of the big donor countries in the world. And many ASEAN countries, especially Southeast Asia, has strong relations with Japan. We all know that especially after Fukuda doctrine, then Japan come to Southeast Asia as a friend, as an equal partner, and this this made many ASEAN countries feel comfort to building relations with Japan rather to other developing countries. And the fourth one is since 2003, the dynamic of Japanese politics, both domestic and international, indicates that there is a willingness of Japan to involve deeper in international issues, not only to become like we call it penonton, like a watcher. They not just to participate in low level issues, but also want to involve in high politic issues. We all know that Prime Minister Abe then tried to raise the issue of dismissed the article of pacifism in Japan Constitution, and this is one of the indication that Japan want to involve deeper. And why Southeast Asia? We all know that economically, politically, and socially, Southeast Asia has a strong relations with Japan. Economically, Southeast Asia is a dynamic region, a big market, and has a lot of natural resources. And in politically, the 10 Southeast Asian countries now in full integration through ASEAN, with many issues still remain. And also, socially, Southeast Asian countries have a historical binding, very, very close historical binding with Japan. We share same values, Asian values with Japan. And I was living in Kyoto for about 5 years, since 2011 until 2016. And living in Kyoto, I feel living in Kyoto is just like living in Indonesia. We have like a similar hospitality. We share like many similarity in terms of daily activity. And also after World War II, Southeast Asia has been one of the most important partners of Japan external relations in all sectors. And the last one is why good governance and civil society. According to Japanese ODA policy, democracy assistance is a form of support to encourage good governance and civil society. So good governance and civil society are Japan's democracy assistance. It is it is a distinction between Japanese democracy assistance compared to other Western countries, because Western countries sometimes they go also to the political system reform, like promoting how your election should be conducted, how your leaders should be elected, and so forth. But Japan's concern also is to establish a good governance and to empower civil society. It is stated in Japanese ODA white paper. And democratic assistance required democratic consolidations, and critical point is to reach by advancing governance and strengthening civil society, because in the end, democratic elected government must govern. Sometimes this is what we found in many transition countries, including in Indonesia. We still face it until now, that democratic elected leaders, democratic elected government, which was produced as an outcome of democratic political system, is not good in govern. So we still face critical issues like corruptions, bad governance, bribery, and so forth. So the puzzle that I would like to share here is Japanese is the biggest aid provider in the world. This country has intention to extend its role in the region as well as in the international arena. And I remember in 2007, there is a new like a vision of Japanese foreign policy called the Arc of Freedom and Prosperity. If I'm not mistaken, it was introduced by former Prime Minister Aso, but it is not become like a popular, and I have never heard this Arc of Freedom and Prosperity nowadays. And then in 2014, there is a change with a proactive contribution to peace. I think this is one of security strategy of Japan's, particularly to Southeast Asia. And Japan also has advantage in its democracy practices, experiencing transition and democratization, and also Japan has like an ASEAN value which can be shared with many Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia. And the question is, how will Japanese democracy assistance implement in this context, and what is the importance of the perspective of recipient side, particularly Indonesia? And I think this is the Arc of Freedom and Prosperity idea, which was introduced by Prime Minister Aso a few years ago in 2004, if I'm not mistaken, 2007, sorry. And this is like the shape of an arc which will share freedom and prosperity led by Japan. And if we take a look at this picture and we combine it with the idea of one belt, one road of Chinese, it seems like they meet here. So this is then can become like an international issue for this the meeting of this vision. And this is the conceptual framework. I can just skip this one, and also the perspective of democracy assistance. Also, I can skip this one. Just can skip it. Skip this one, and okay. This is the situation of global democracy assistance. In general, although the data is quite long, it is about 10 years ago, but I take a look that the data is not much different until now. Democracy assistance is still considered as about less than 50% of the global ODA. So most of the ODA in the world is distributed to infrastructures, to economic development, and also including the security. But for the democracy itself, it is less than 50% in average. And then Japanese democracy assistance compared to global bilateral ODA, it is less than 5% in general. Some of them even less than less than 1%. I mean, it is very low. And this is the democracy assistance, Japanese democracy assistance in terms of OECD democracy assistance data, which categorized in several sectors like public sector and administration, public financial management, decentralization, and anti-corruption, and so forth. And the highest one is legal and judicial development. Sorry. Legal and judicial development. And this is the changes of Japanese ODA charter in 1992. The objective of the charter is to garner broader support for Japan's official development assistance through better understanding at home and abroad, and to implement it more effectively and efficiently. And in 2003, it is changed, and I just found out that in 2015, the Japanese ODA charter has been changed to the new term called Development Cooperation Charter, in which just revised in last June 2015. And this is also the continuation of this Japanese ODA charter changing. And if we take a look, this is then confirm the presentations of previous presenter, that Japan then give like a more attention to security issues rather than just economic and development issues. And still, Japan prioritized the Asia as a core region in its ODA. And Japanese democracy assistance in Southeast Asia, I provide also this data just to show the how is the distributions of Japanese ODA and Japanese DA, or democracy assistance. Indonesia is still the biggest recipient of Japanese ODA, but Japanese democracy assistance, but the amount is still very low compared to overall official development assistance. So we can take a look at this data that the share of Japanese democracy assistance is still also very, very low. We can take a look at this data. And this is the finding that I would like to share, that amount of Japanese democracy assistance towards Southeast Asian countries is very low. It is less than 1% of total ODA. And it is need to explain, particularly with its connection with the suitability of ODA Charter, because the ODA Charter clearly mentions that Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, is the core region of Japanese development assistance target, but the share for democracy assistance is still very low. And the distributions of assistance to each country, it is we still to explain why the number of ODA in Myanmar is very low, and for democracy assistance in Indonesia is also quite low, very low. And the last one is the strategy and approach, improving and involvement of the field where individual countries need the most. For example, in Indonesia, the issue of anti-corruption, in Myanmar, the political party and election, in Malaysia, freedom of information, in Thailand, civil and military relations, in Philippines, the political dynasty issues and ATC. And for the closing of these presentations, the Japanese involvement in democracy assistance around the world can be considered as less compared to other donor countries. And in relations with regional priority, Japanese ODA consistently place Southeast Asia as the main target for development assistance, but with lesser compliance with supporting governance and civil society, known as the core component of democracy assistance. So while Japan has adopted a new foreign policy strategy, the arc of freedom and prosperity and the proactive contribution to peace, there still remains a need and opportunity to increase Japan's engagement in democratization process, either by promoting or protecting democracy. And I think this is the closing for this. I think this is just pengantar for this discussion, and I hope that I can get more improvement for this presentation. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum, selamat sore.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak, Pak Ishaq. Thank you very much for your presentation. We will have a very interesting discussion after this. I will invite Mas Gusti Raganata and also Mas Wira Halim to join us as our panelists. We can start our discussion with our honorable speakers, Yasutomi Sensei, Kiba Sensei, and also Pak Ishaq. Mas Gusti, halo Mas.
Halo.
Halo.
Can you hear me well?
Halo Mas Wira. Ya, kedengaran Mas Gusti. Yes, very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Halo
Mbak
Mas Wira.
Aisyah.
Yeah. I will welcome Mas Gusti first to have to comment on today's speaker's presentation and also give your maybe like point of view or maybe like questions. Mas Gusti, silahkan.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Marapi Consulting, for inviting me in this panel session. Yeah. So I want to say thank you so much for your very interesting presentation for all the senseis, and also Pak Ishaq, yeah, the one about the Japanese democratization ODA. Yeah, it's also very interesting where he shows some shifting, yeah, from traditional Japanese ODA to recent ODA for democratization. Yeah. And I want to share you that recently, when we talk about the relationship between Japan and Indonesia, especially tomorrow we will celebrate the 78th Independence Day of Indonesia. So we cannot also let Japan outside this conversation, yeah. And today, like we know that in geopolitical constellation, that we know that right now China is a growing power in the world, and especially in Asia, there's some need of imbalance power in this constellation. Where the US now there are two blocks between the US and also in Japan, so in China. So I think Japan can play a pivotal role in this geopolitical issue in 21st century. Yeah. So recently, like we know that Japan, as senseis told me that right now Japanese ODA on military start to grow, where Prabowo Subianto, our Indonesia Minister of Defense, to Japan and talks about some plan to buy some military equipment from Japan. It's also very interesting to know that we interested to Japanese military equipment. Usually we only interest to Japanese cars and products, yeah. But today we need interest to Japanese navy and ships. Another thing is so Japan is still, but although there's a new trend about military interest in Japan, also there's some kind of how to say, there's some kind of domestic, yeah, disappointed with when Prime Minister Abe wants to amend the constitution, yeah, at the time where he wants to make Japanese military to have a more role in the world peacekeeping, actually. But actually, it's not really matters for Indonesia, basically, because we don't have although we have a lot of history, but maybe a lot of a country like Korea, China, etc. maybe will protesting about the issue. Why? Because there's some kind of history. It's not finished until today, I think, for them. Maybe because the pastime or wartime issue, etc. And then for Indonesia, I think as saya sensei told us about, Japan has done a lot of repatriation and ODA to ensure so we can develop this country to more advanced today. Yeah. But we will still welcome what kind of Japanese role in the 21st century are there will become a more military active, especially in peacekeeping mode, or maybe they start to become a military industry in this century also. This also very interesting issue, yeah, to grow in the next recent years, especially if in Japan-Indonesia relationship, we think that we will get a better relationship maybe in the near future, because the ODA is not only to build infrastructure, like secure infrastructure such as bridge, transportation, public transportation, and cars, etc. But also now we start to have a relationship to build also a military alliance, yeah, especially to imbalancing the power in Asia. So we looking forward to the next step of collaboration between Japan and Indonesia in a new kind of relationship and collaboration.
Thank you, Mas Gusti. Maybe after this, our speakers will also have comments regarding to that. But before that, I will also want to invite Mas Wira to give some comments to our speakers' presentations.
Thank you, Aisyah. Thank you, Atsushi. Thank you, Dr. Kiba, and thank you, Ishaq tadi untuk presentasinya. Yeah, I think one of the most interesting aspect of this relationship between Japan and Indonesia, I think for the past few decades, I think Japan has been known to be a very pacifist country in terms of its foreign policy and defense policy. And now, for the past few years, we're seeing a shift in Japan's outlook or defensive posture from a very passive player in the region to aspiring to be a more assertive player in the region. And I think for a lot of people here in Indonesia, I think we are so used to having this very what do you call it, a civil relationship with Japan, in terms of like most of the core of the Indonesian-Japanese relationship for the for the past decades in Indonesia has been economic and cultural and social cooperation. I think Japan has brought in technology in Indonesia, automobiles, motorcycles, electronics, and also like pop culture in terms of manga, anime, even J-pop before the K-pop wave took over. Yeah, but now we're seeing that Japan is changing its outlook on defense, and just like Gusti just said just now, there are opportunities actually in terms of like defense cooperation, maybe military cooperations. But I think that's one of the things that is going to be interesting, and how what is the role of I mean, for the past few decades, I mean, if we have established a community here, for example, like Persada, the alumni association from Japan, has been very active in promoting and cultivating cooperation between Japan and Indonesia, especially in economic and social spheres, including education, charities, and also technology transfer. But now with this new aspect coming into play, which is the defense, the more assertive defense posture from Japan, and just like Dr. Kiba just mentioned, maybe ASEAN has more experience in doing this type of cooperations with other countries. But Indonesia itself has been we are neutral. We are not non-block in terms of like we have a free and active policy. Doesn't mean that we're not going to take side, but I think the way we going to process the decision to veer towards one end or the other is going to be a very more active and more neutral. And how would this relationship, I think, come at play? Right? We have Japan and Indonesia. I mean, in terms of economic cooperation, I think Japan and Indonesia can be we can call Indonesia and Japan are 100% on the same page, because both countries are set on economic prosperity, growth, and how to build economies, how to increase trade and commerce between two countries. But now with defense aspect coming in, how would that? I think there's this question. I think to the speakers from Japan, how would this aspect influence Japanese foreign policy? Coming in from foreign policy that focuses on economic cooperation, but now you get defense at play, and how would this shape Japanese policy towards Indonesia, for example? And I think my question to Ishaq, I think, and how would Indonesia respond to it? I mean, can Indonesia benefit from it, or would that place Indonesia in a corner when Indonesia have to choose? Because definitely Japan and Indonesia might have differences in terms of like assessing the regional situation at the moment, because Indonesia is more friendly towards other regional players, but with Japan there might be more security issues at play, especially because they border North Korea and everything such. And so that would be a difference that would be interesting to see. And I think that's my questions to the speakers for today, if anybody else wants to read it. But again, thank you for the speakers for the wonderful presentations. Looking forward for the discussion. Thank you, Aisyah.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Mas Wira. Before we are going to answer the very, it's quite complicated question, but it's also very interesting. I will also want to welcome Professor Hikmahanto. He already joined with us at this session. And
yes, thank you.
Halo, Profesor. Terima kasih banyak, Profesor. Salam kenal, saya Ai dari Persada. Terima kasih banyak, Profesor, sebelumnya sudah berkenan memberikan waktunya. Ini nanti kita akan undang Profesor untuk sebagai closing keynote ya, Profesor ya. Ini sekarang kita akan
silakan. Saya ikut mendengarkan.
Terima kasih, Profesor. Okay, so continuing to our discussion, our speakers, you have your time. Maybe from Yasutomi Sensei first. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Thank you very much. It was really exciting comments, and also very difficult questions to answer, but I thank you very much anyway. I try to answer some of the questions. I would like to start with the discussion of Japanese constitutional amendment. Those who are new, I happen to have some slides about the Japanese constitutional amendment, so I would like to share just a bit in answering this question. What is the Japanese constitution? Article 9 says that Section 1, aspiring sincerely to an international peace based on justice and order, the Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat or use of force as a means of settling international disputes. That itself is really normal. I think you will see the same similar contents in every sovereign nation, I think, in the Constitution. Second section is really particular, very unique. In order to accomplish the aim of this preceding paragraph, land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained. The right of belligerency of this state will not be recognized. This section 2 is very problematic. Why? Well, as Kiba already said in her presentation, we have the military. Japan Self-Defense Forces is virtually a military with 280,000 people, which is equivalent to German Bundeswehr. So you cannot just call it not a military. It's a military. It's heavily equipped. It's the 6th or 7th richest military. So we have to acknowledge the fact that it is the military. Well, then how do we solve this problem? It's becoming a really big discussions for decades and decades and decades. And any Japan Self-Defense Forces military actions may infringe on Article 9.1, renunciation of a war, or Chapter 9.2, belligerency. So whatever Japan Self-Defenses do, it becomes a constitutional problem. Also, we have a POW problem. If Japan Self-Defense Forces soldiers were called, and then it not be subject to POW under international law. So that are some of the crucial points we have to solve. And then if you look at some opinion polls, do you think the Japan Self-Defense Forces is constitutionally legitimate? 62% of the people say yes. I don't think so, 33%. Do you think the Constitution should be amended? Conservative Yomiuri Shimbun, 56% of the people say yes, against 49% no. Whereas a liberal, Mainichi Shimbun, or left-wing people, also, this is very interesting. Yes, 48%, against 31% no. And do you think we should amend a 9th article of the Constitution? Yes, 51, and 30% no, by the Mainichi Shimbun, which is a left wing, which is more pacifist approach. So I think this suggests that many people begin to worry, begin to recognize this. Something is wrong with the 9th article of the Constitution. But at the same time, I do understand very much, as a Japanese citizen as well, you don't want to change this pacifist constitution. It's beautifully written, and the Japanese public wants to keep it as like a ideal. And many people believe that changing this constitution itself is like a betrayal to peace. You know, it's like a public attitude. So when it comes to this, when I was presenting a couple of minutes ago, this 2015 security legislation reform that allowed many things without changing all this constitutional amendment, without having constitutional amendment. So these are, the legal pathways to solve some problems. So there is still the constitutional amendment is a national dividing debate, of course. But this is my analysis, my idea. But the Japanese government as a whole, Japanese public as a whole, while they still need to think we have to amend a constitution in the long run, but we can do many things as we have this security law reforms already came into power. So we have solved many problems already. So I think this constitutional amendment is not going to happen sometime in a very short term. That's my response. I don't think I can answer many questions. Indonesia being a neutral and how Japan can play, I think, as somebody already mentioned, Japan can be like a very good intervener between US and Japan as well, in the hikes of this Sino-China-US schism or conflict, whatever you may call. And I know that Indonesia would like to stay neutral between China and the US. But from the Japanese point of view, it is crucial that we kind of effectively invite Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia included, would like to drag is a little bit too strong a word, but would like to invite for collaboration, security collaboration, defense collaboration with Indonesia, without really, punching your nose and everything, but it's like effectively inviting for good collaboration. I think Japan can do a very good job with economic collaboration and also defense collaboration, as just Kiba already explained. Military industries, there are many problems. Legal constraints already explained to you. There are 5 types restriction, including transportation, surveillance, alerts, and so on. But we have been discussing whether we can modify these principles. But at the same time, Japanese military industries also have their own problems because they have already been customized. They have only customers, which are Japan self-defense forces. So they become very expensive, right? So we cannot just simply sell all these products to Southeast Asia just like that. Also, Japanese public still fear this word death merchants or merchants of death. And then stockholders also don't think it is really good idea to sell military equipments to other countries. So Japanese industries really fear all these public concerns of becoming death merchants. I think I talked too much, so I will end here. I'll give it to Kiba.
木場先生、Yasutomi先生、ありがとうございます。木場先生、はい。
Yes, thank you so much. Dr. Yasutomi already talked a lot, and I'd like to just mention, that the ambiguity of the Japanese foreign policy is because of our messaging. So, for example, if you see the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, now the keyword is a free and open Indo-Pacific, of FOIP, and it's almost everywhere. It's like a grand strategy of Japan's foreign policy and defense cooperation. But in Southeast Asia, in some particular countries like Thailand, for example, or in Myanmar, if we emphasize free and open, and then some of our partners say, "Oh my God, free and open, it doesn't sound really good," and then we stop. We keep it very low profile. So that kind of by country approach is really a big problem of ours. The Professor Ishaq mentioned the democracy promotion, but actually recently we do not use the word of democracy promotion. We prefer the word of good governance, right? The governance assistance, which sounds softer, it's more, it's more catchy for the Southeast Asian partners, which, some of course, Indonesia, Philippines, they are the big democracies in Southeast Asia, but the other countries, they do not like the word of democratization or democracy assistance. So we changed the word, we changed the messaging by country. So that's why it is quite ambiguous. What is the grand strategy of Japan's aid policy or the foreign policies?
We also use the word rule of law, that I think that is becoming the central word.
Very interesting. Thank you, Kiba Sensei. Pak Ishaq? Apa?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you very much. So actually, this is one of one of my challenge when I started my research in Japan in 2011, because at the time, as an Indonesian studied in Japan, I always have an idea to learn something in Japan about Japan and then bring it back to Indonesia. So I researched about Japan. Then my sensei told me, Professor Eiji Oyamada from Doshisha University, he told me that, Ishaq-san, if you read 50 articles about Japan, you only read the article in English, while the Japanese will read maybe 100 or maybe 500 articles in kanji, in Japanese. So it will be very difficult for you to defend or to provide your research in front of Japanese scholars if you research about Japan. So then he asked me to change and to come back to Indonesia and research about Indonesia and then present it in front of Japanese scholars. Then what I present will become, we will have like a high novelty. There's a lot of new things for Japanese scholars if I do that. So in terms of relations in democracy assistance, thank you, Kiba-san. I always mentioned before that in the context of Japanese democracy assistance, what is democracy assistance? Democracy assistance is good governance, promoting good governance and civil society. But as Maiko Ichihara mentioned in his article in 2016, that one of the challenges of Japan's democracy support to Indonesia is very, very weak involvement at civil society, because most donor agency from Western countries, they come to Indonesia either bilateral or by direct involvement with civil society organizations. In case of Japan, it is very, very rare to find the Indonesian NGOs or in the Indonesian civil society organizations, CBOs, or the other names, which has relations with Japan's organizations. And also the other opportunity that I would like to share, that in Indonesia we have regulations. The latest one is Ministry of Internal Affairs Decree number 25 years 2020 about the opportunity for direct relations and direct cooperation between local government in Indonesia with local government abroad. So this opportunity actually can be utilized by local government in Japan to cooperate with local governments in Indonesia. We have such kind of opportunity, and this is actually can be maximized and can be improved in the future in order to closer the relations between Indonesia and Japan. My point is the strong relations between Indonesia and Japan should be extended not only to government government to government relations, but also to people and people relations. Thank you very much, San.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Ishaq. I think we already got very good questions and also very insightful answers from our speakers. Okay, before we are going to open more discussion after this, I would love to invite Professor Hikmahanto as our keynote speakers today. Professor, hello.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for inviting me as a keynote speech here. Thank you very much, all of the speakers. I see that that's the Professor Atsushi Yasutomi. I'm sorry, and then also saya Kiba, Professor saya Kiba, and also Professor Ishaq Rahman, and also Pak Budi Kodar from Persada, and Mas Wira Halim. Well, thank you very much for an interesting topic. I apologize. I have to enter very late, but in any case, I pick up the points, and I would like to say here 4 things that I think probably may be important to all of us. First of all, let us not outlive past memories with the challenges that we are going to face either now or in the future, because the challenges are great and the challenges cannot be coped only by one country. It has to be coped by many countries. And the challenges that we are facing are various, starting from the recent pandemic, for example, and also the climate change. We felt that, and also the war in Ukraine. This is some of the challenges that we are facing. The question is, are we going to always remember the past memories that many of the younger generation regret, not only from Japan but also from Indonesia? Why the war happened? What was the purpose of the war at that time? Probably at that time the context forced people to go to war, but now we cannot live with another war. For example, we see what is happening in Ukraine, and our President Joko Widodo has spoken that he wanted to terminate the war. Why? Because the war, as in the previous time, it only gives misery to humankind, not only for Indonesian, not only for the Japanese, not only for the Ukrainians, not only the Russian, but humankind, meaning that all of us. So we need to stop that war. But the second issue is, we know that every country has its sovereignty. And of course, we need to respect that sovereignty. When Russia strikes to Ukraine, the question is why? And the Russian will say that we do this because we have a basis under Article 51 of the UN Charter. But the Ukrainians say, no, you don't have the right to do so, because under Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter, it is provided that states may not use force to do something with the territorial integrity of another state. This is difficult for us. Are we going to support Russia, or are we going to support the Ukraine? Well, let me tell you this. From the Indonesian perspective, we have a foreign policy of free and active. And I always said to my president that we should not judge either Ukraine or Russia, because there is no, under international community or international law, for us to have the authority to judge who is right or who is wrong. Yeah. I uphold, support my president's position. That is to terminate the war now. This is based under Article 2, Paragraph 3 of the UN Charter, which says that a state that has a dispute, they should settle it peacefully, so not to jeopardize the security, the stability, or the international justice. And this is very important. But if we start to judge that, for example, Russia is wrong, then our problem is, how are we going to mediate? How are we going to have a role in this war? Or vice versa, if we say Russia is right, are we going to be accepted as a mediator by the Ukrainian? The answer would be no. Meaning that, yes, we will respect the sovereignty of countries. But of course, we need to work together to solve the problem of humankind. Again, I have to stress to solve the problem of humankind, not our individual state. So if, for example, Japan would want to amend its Article 9, so be it. It is the right of Japan. But of course, we need to remember the neighboring states, China or the two Koreas, may not like this. We understand that. For Indonesia, we have to take actions. We have to maintain stability. How? Of course, we would remind the two countries without intervening, that what will happen to the world. You know, when I'm being asked, what is the scenario in ending the war in Ukraine? I said there are 4 scenarios. First, one of the country will win the war, either Russia or Ukraine. But in this first scenario, the two will escalate their strike against each other. And money, energy will be there. And what I regret mostly is there's going to be victims, human lives. That's one. Second, the scenario to end the war is a change in the government, either in Russia or in Ukraine or both of the countries. But when you said change of the government, then you can do it constitutionally, but also unconstitutionally. When you said unconstitutionally, this is where the intelligence will play its role. And we've seen that. The intelligence tried to topple President Putin, for example, or vice versa. And we also experienced, under the Sukarno era, changing to Suharto era. To me, it is not alone our effort, but also the invisible hands of other countries. Why the change of government will end the war? Because we understand a change in government means a change in policy. So we are hoping if there is a change of government, there's going to be a change in policy in stopping the war. Third, the scenario is a zero-sum game. This is when Russia uses its nuclear weapons. If Russia being cornered by many countries and Russia does not want to lose its face, then they will say, the last resort, I'm going to use the nuclear weapons. And we do not want that to happen. Why? Because we understand from the experience of Japan, the people in Japan, in Hiroshima, in Nagasaki, what has happened there. And we, as humankind, do not want that to happen again, to reoccur again. That's why the fourth scenario is the best scenario, which is a third country becoming a mediator. A third country that is neutral, a third country that is not going to be sided either with Russia or with Ukraine. This has been exemplified, among others, by our president, President Joko Widodo, apart from President Erdogan, and now there's an effort from Saudi Arabia, and many more. Our president, you know, I complained with my Minister of Foreign Affairs when Indonesia becoming a co-sponsor with the United States, who is the sponsor in condemning Russia. Why I'm complaining? Because if we condemn, then how are we going to become a third party to mediate the two who is, you know, going against each other? No, it's going to be very difficult. Yeah. Thankfully, when our president came to the G7 meeting last year, he was accepted. And then next, he went to Ukraine to see President Zelensky, and he was accepted, including when he went to President Putin, and he was accepted. Now, the thing that the president tell this head of state why the war is to be stopped is because we will face a crisis, human crisis, food crisis, financial crisis, and mind you, the food crisis, financial crisis, energy crisis will first hit the third world countries. It's not the first world countries. This is a tragedy for humankind. Thus, I believe that we need to pursue people-to-people relations, the people of Japan and the people of Indonesia. This is most important rather than state-to-state relations. Why people-to-people is very important? Because we, the people, can influence the government. We, the people, the one who has the sovereignty over our country. The government has to abide with the will of the people. And lastly, I think Japan and Indonesia has a close relations, not only people to people, but also state to state. And we have to maintain this, and hopefully with the good relations of the two countries, we can benefit the world. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih banyak, Profesor Hikmahanto. Thank you very much for your very inspiring speech. And we really know that peace is very expensive in terms of cost, energy, money, and also people, and the importance of people to people. And as for today's next agenda, we'll have a couple of questions that we already received. I will say, okay, I will ask Pak Yuda first. Oh, okay, Pak Budi Kohar. Pak Budi Kohar, just raise your hand. Pak Budi Kohar.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Ai. So, both Yasutomi Sensei and also Kiba Sensei discussed about nuclear military facilities and defense law and security matters. And especially Dr. Kiba said that with the reform of an amendment in Japan's law defense, yes, Japan from now on will sell defense equipment. Let's say Indonesia will buy 4 Mogami class frigate, and then Abu Kuma class frigate, and also F-15J fighters, yeah, because its engine can be used for Indonesian F-16. But does the Japanese government have a plan to develop ship maintenance facilities at the outer island of Indonesia or strategic island of Indonesia? Because I think it will change the power balance in Asian, I think. Thank you.
We'll answer first and then next go to the next question. from the speakers.
Okay.
I'll let you decide. Yeah. Kiba Sensei.
Well, some very progressive people in Japan is also discussing such a things, but you know, the legal bilateral legal problems, right? So if we set up any military facilities in Indonesia or any other countries, we first need the status of force agreement or probably not the MOU, and then we need the Senate, the parliamentary ratifications, etc. So I think it's not very realistic to consider the Indonesia first. Probably the Philippines first, because the Philippines already opened their bases to the United States, right? And then the United States are now using the Philippine bases within rotation bases. And then if the Japan join, like, you know, developing the bases in the Philippines using the OSA funding, for example, and then it can be, right, the ship maintenance facility, or we can just borrow the part of the Philippine bases, particularly in South China Sea area. Then we can do something, and then it may change the power balance. But you know, anyway, we have to ratify the bilateral agreement, and then we need the domestic discussion in each side. Yeah. So I think it's a long way to go.
Thank you, Kiba Sensei. Yes, Tomi
I'd like to
Sensei.
Yeah, as I already explained in the previous presentation, we need to go through this amendment of principles of transfer of military equipment. Right now, we have been restricted to these 5 types. You see, rescue, transfer, alert, surveillance, all these non-military. Well, it's a military, but it's not really lethal combat type of equipment. So first we have to amend. It's not a law, but it's a principles, and then it requires a lot of discussions, even within the ruling parties, liberal democratic parties, and Komeito, which is the coalition party. There is some schism, some discussions. If this amendment or reforms can be done, maybe it's too much, or maybe we should go a little slower. So even within these ruling parties, there are some discussions still going on. Especially the opposition party really doesn't want to hear this discussion at all. So I think you have a long way to go until this your proposal, but maybe in the long run, probably I don't know the details of this ship repair and other facilities, but maybe in the long run it could be possible. But I just would like to say, just like Kiba Sensei said, we have so many steps ahead to reach that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomi Sensei. Pak Ishaq, do you have anything to add?
I think I have no comment from me, because it is more to security issues.
Yeah, Pak.
Yeah.
Okay, Pak Hikmahanto, do you have anything to add to the question?
I don't think I have to add, but you know, the only thing that I would like to say here is, you know, the United States has been very active in this region. Of course, not in this region, but also in European region and other regions. NATO, like the US, but I don't think in this region we like NATO to be here. We do not like the US to be very aggressive. We understand that there is a competition between the US and China. And of course, the US will ask their friends, probably including Japan, because Japan has a security arrangement with the US. And of course, Japan is going to be very vulnerable if faced with China or especially North Korea. So they need the US to be there. But the problem with the US being within our region is escalating the tension. And this has become a problem. For example, the 9-dash line issue. Of course, Indonesia do not recognize the 9-dash line claimed by China. China also do not recognize the economic zone, the exclusive economic zone in the North Natuna, claimed by Indonesia. Yeah, and we have problem. But the thing is, the US will come to us and then they will say that can we do anything to assist? Meaning that they need to be to have a proxy so that they will face with China. I mean, this is what is happening in Vietnam. This is what is happening in Philippines. So to me, this is only escalating war to happen. And as I mentioned, you know, I respect people of Japan, which they do not want to enter into a war anymore. That was the reason why Article 9 was drafted, even though there's, you know, people saying that there's an influence from, at the time, the US occupation government, Douglas MacArthur. But I think this is the will of the people of Japan, that they do not want to enter into a war. This is very important. And I think this region have to also agree with the Japanese people when they said that, look, we do not want a war in this region. We do not want what is happening in Ukraine to happen within this region. That's all that I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. All right. I think this will be the second and the last question. I'll let Pak Yuda to ask to the speaker.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Moderator, for this session. I want to ask about the Indonesia-Japan's relation in the perspective of economics, on how to drive electric vehicle market. As we know that Indonesia-Japan relation possess significant potential for propelling the growth of the electric vehicle market. And as we know that this country have joined forces in strategic collaboration to expedite the widespread adoption of electric vehicles. And from the news, we see that Japan's auto industry remains hesitant to embrace electric vehicle. It means that Japan currently dominates the market for gasoline electric hybrids and wants to maximize its investment to this technology. However, this focus on hybrid risks leaving the country auto industry behind as the world transition to the EV. I want to ask to Sensei and other speakers, what do you see about this opportunity from the economics side, on the opportunities to strengthen Indonesia-Japan's to assist Indonesia plans to downstream the industry, as President Jokowi and its staff broadcast currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Yuda. I think this question is to Yasutomi Sensei and also Kiba Sensei, because I think it's about how Japan perceive, right?
Okay,
it's very related to energy, and also how I mean, like, it's environmental as well, and defense as well, perhaps, which relates to our economy.
Yeah, Sensei, thank you. I mean, for the answering.
Wow, this is the hardest, most difficult question I ever hear today. I have no idea whatsoever about electric vehicles. So maybe I should ask Kiba Sensei if you know something about economic cooperation.
Well, I just attended an international conference of EV a week ago, and then our conclusion was that we are much behind, and then the market is all, Chinese, right? So
Maybe it's something
yeah,
that we can talk more later on, Kiba Sensei, as the part of
Yeah.
Japan and Indonesia relation, right?
Yeah.
okay.
Kiba Sensei, dozo.
On the EV.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you have anything to add, perhaps anything that you also like heard from the conference as well, something that we can learn from it.
No, actually, it's not my field, so I'm so sorry that I do not know the EV strategy of Japanese companies, and yeah.
I think the next step for our webinar, I think we will also invite industrial Japan industry as well, like the
Sure.
big motors and all the industry too. For our next webinar, I think it's a very interesting discourse as well related to our relationship Indonesia and Japan. I think we will conclude our webinar here. As the time is already like past the schedule actually. Thank you very much everyone for very enthusiastic participation. Ladies and gentlemen, and also our honorable speakers. Yasutomi Sensei, Kiba Sensei, thank you very much for your presentation. Pak Ishaq, thank you very much for your presentation as well. Professor Hikmahanto, it's such an honor for us to have you here. Mas Gusti and Mas Wira, thank you very much as well for being the panelists for today's webinar, for the very amazing question and also comments. I think it's also the start only for us to have this discourse, right? We will have this kind of like webinars again later on because not yet finished talking about the EV first of all, right? And also the other industry, perhaps in food and beverage, agricultural, and all the things that we can talk more after this. Or maybe after this webinar, we can have like exchange contacts so that we can, have more like think tank time to have that discussion. I will invite Marapi team as the host of today's webinar, Pak Wira and also Pak Beni. Thank you so much for having us and inviting Persada to. Pak Wira, do you have anything to conclude for this webinar?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say domo arigato gozaimasu to my very good friend, Professor Atsushi Yasutomi and Professor Kiba. Terima kasih yang sedalam-dalamnya kepada Pak Budi Kohar dan rekan-rekan dari Persada, Aisyah, Pak Hideki yang sudah memfasilitasi. Terima kasih kepada Asosiasi Ilmu Hubungan Internasional Indonesia. Tadi Pak Asep udah jalan duluan, tapi terima kasih Pak Ishaq. Kita nih jangan kapok-kapok kayak kita Pak ya. Dan juga deep gratitude to everybody who has attended this session. Dari awal sampai akhir tadi kita ngeliat partisipasinya yang ikut cukup banyak. Semoga ini bukan yang terakhir ya, tapi artinya bukan yang pertama dan terakhir, tapi mungkin pertama dari sekian banyak lagi karena because I see Indonesia and Japan has cultivated, has fostered a very strong relationship over the years. And this is a very, very beautiful relationship because that relationship has produced economic growth, bring technologies to Indonesia, and educated thousands of Indonesians. And I think that there's a relationship I think that's worth fighting for, yeah. And with a lot of new challenges coming in, I mean globally and regionally with geopolitical conflict, climate change, and new technologies coming in to address all kinds of things from pollution to population growth, how to create jobs and prosperity for everybody, and how to ensure that prosperity is safe and secure. And I think for the past, many years, I think is a lot of the discussion about this topic has kind of overlooked the relationship that Japan and Indonesia has. So there's not many discussions I mean, for the past few years, talking about Indonesia-Japan relationship in terms of political side of it, the geopolitical, defense, security. And I think most of us are more concerned with economic cooperation. But I think with the changing world and the challenges we have to adapt to, I think it's worth looking back at this relationship and then, take it to another level. Because I think Japan and Indonesia has what it takes to become even closer strategic partners for the future. And again, thank you to Persada for partnering us in this webinar. Terima kasih. And from our friends from Japan, Professor Atsushi Yasutomi, Professor Kiba, and our dear colleagues from Asosiasi Ilmu Hubungan Internasional Indonesia, Pak Asep dan Pak Ishaq, terima kasih. Dan juga rekan-rekan mahasiswa, pelajar, media semua sudah hadir. Saya serahkan ke Pak Beni Sukadis, mungkin mau nambahkan. Terima kasih dari saya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Cukup. Pak Beni, sehat ya Pak Beni.
Terima kasih Prof. Hikmahanto sudah hadir,
Ya,
Prof.
sama-sama Pak Wira. Sama-sama, terima kasih.
Terakhir
Semua
mungkin
ini,
kita
Prof.
foto bareng kali ya untuk
Oke.
menutup ya. Kalau yang bisa buka kamera mungkin buka kamera untuk dokumentasi kita hari ini. Oke. Kita tunggu sampai 10 ya. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Saya izin foto ya. Senyum. Oke, nanti saya akan kirim fotonya.
Baik.
Oke, terima kasih semuanya. Saya izin tutup di sini ya. Thank you very much. Shitsurai itashimasu. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Bye.
Gozaimasu.
Bye.
Sensei, Prof.
Duluan.
Sampai
Makasih.
ketemu lagi.
Pak Wira, Pak Beni,
Terima
makasih.
kasih nih, Prof.
Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih Prof, terima kasih semuanya.
Terima kasih
Terima
Profesor.
kasih banyak. Ini
Oke.
saya senang sekali tadi ketemu ibu saya Kiba. Ternyata dia
Pak Ishaq udah masuk Persada belum nih Pak Ishaq nih?
Nah,
udah
saya
di
tungguin,
Makassar.
Pak.
Di Makassar pesadanya cukup aktif, Mas.
Oh,
Oke.
iya. Di Makassar betul aktif di sana, ada
Makassar,
Bu
ya,
Lita
kami
segala macam Pak ya.
Iya, betul. Siap.
Double
Makasih
agent
banyak.
jadi nih AIHII dan Persada.
Ya, betul.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih
Terima
banyak
kasih
Pak
banyak
Ishaq.
Pak Budi, Pak Beni, makasih banyak
Baik,
Pak.
terima kasih.
Kesempatannya. Ya,
Izin
Mas
live ya,
Wira,
izin live. Terima
Izin
kasih.
live.
izin live.